What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Innovative Seller. This is going to be your go-to show to learn what's new, what's interesting in the world of sales and technology. Every single week, we're going to be bringing you interviews with some of the most forward-thinking thought leaders in the space. You get a chance to ask me questions in our Q&A section, and I'll break down the top trends in sales processes and technology every single show. So sit back and let's get into it. All right, that's episode number 8 coming at you of Innovative Seller Show. I'm Jake Dunlap. I'm really excited for this conversation, really excited to jump into it with all of you. Today's episode might make some friends, might make some people think, might make some people say, but Jake, that's just not how this works, right? And so in sales process trends, I'm gonna talk about this concept. And this concept's been around for a little bit, and I've touched on it here or there, which is personalization at scale. This concept of how do we actually build a human-centric sales interaction points where we're using a ton of technology. It's very, very scalable, but it might not be 100% automated. In the interview, you're gonna get a chance. I teased this one for our interview, and I teased this one maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. I'm sitting down with David Cohen. David is the ex-global head of sales for LinkedIn Talent Solutions. He ran a group that was billions in revenue every single year. And he and I are gonna talk about the importance of metrics and picking what matters most. And last, but certainly not least, we've got tech trends. And tech trends today, I think, is gonna be a fun one for a lot of you, right? When we start to think about this rapidly evolving world, I'm seeing consolidation everywhere. You see, this technology now does these 5 things, and this one does here. And it can be very easy to say, well, shoot, instead of doing a point solution that's best in class here, something that's best in class here, best in class here, I could have this one tool that's like, it's okay at a lot of things. And so I'm gonna break down the idea of consolidation or keeping with your best in class point solution process. And then always we'll wrap up with some Q&A. So make sure, buckle up, let's jump into it. All right, and for tech trends, this is a big one. If you're in sales, you've seen it, you've had all of a sudden, wait, why am I using this tool versus this one? It's the idea of consolidation versus best in class. Right now, we're seeing this all over the market. We're like, well, this tool now does these 7 things, so let's get rid of these other ones. That should be easier. Not always. There is a point in time where you should be choosing best in class because this thing really sucks at those other 3 things, and you need something that's really good. So I'm gonna try to give you a framework of when should I consolidate or when should I choose best in class. It's gonna be a fun one. Make sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's get into it. All right, in today's sales process trend, I'm gonna discuss a topic that many of you have maybe heard of, personalization at scale, but I'm gonna try to give you a new framework for how to think about it. I'm gonna spotlight Tesla, and I'm also gonna spotlight how successful B2B organizations are able to build out systems and processes that aren't just about automate everything and how do I get out more emails, but instead, how do I get more results? I want you to imagine personalizing your service or product for millions, all right? Ensuring every single customer feels uniquely valued. It's the holy grail of modern business, but here's where many stumble, achieving this at scale. What's the solution? It's integrating human insight into the automation process for where? The Q&A final steps. And I'm gonna show you exactly how you can do that for your revenue organization. Take Tesla, okay? A pioneer in not just automotive innovation, right? But also in customer experience, right? Despite their advanced automation, and now Eli's like, implanting chips into people's heads, right? Tesla incorporates expert engineers in the QA process, right? Ensuring every vehicle isn't just built okay, it's crafted to perfection. This blend of technology and human precision is what sets them apart. Now, switching gears to B2B, success in outbound processes hinges on personalization, okay? The top players leverage AI for strategy and insights, right? But they have the human tailor and refine every single message. The human QA guarantees that each little individual point of outreach is not just seen, but felt by actually connecting with someone. And hopefully then once they see that message and understanding someone gets it, booking a meeting, or getting engaged with your team. So what's clear from leaders at Tesla and other B2B organizations? In our automated world, personalization at scale thrives on the human element. It's not about replacing humans with tech 100%, but enhancing their capabilities, right? Generative AI is amazing, not at writing the emails or just sending a bunch of automations, but instead saying, hey, for this persona in this sub-industry, what are the top 3 trends? And then that's where the human comes in. Where imagine a world where I can get insights into my tools and systems, and the person says, hey, I know this industry a little bit better, or oh, I know this one case study. I'm gonna copy and paste that snippet and put it at the end, right? So for everyone out there, if you want to know how to do this personalization at scale, steal from the Tesla model, which says, look, how can I get the system set up? Great. How can I make sure I get the right data in there? Great. How can I make sure it's insights that are going to be very specific to someone? Great. And then let the person do the last mile. That is how this works. We've seen it work with organizations. It's working for some of the most cutting edge and leading consumer brands that you buy from actually every single day. All of these, almost every little thing that you buy, things that are on this desk, there's a human in the loop from a QA standpoint. That, my friends, is how you do personalization at scale. So now let's jump into the interview with me and David. I'm really excited for this conversation. Make sure to hit the subscribe button as well, too, if you haven't, and let's get into it. I'm excited for this one. Consistent performance optimization is very near and dear to my heart in terms of how I think we're going to have to scale more like, with less in the future, right? Where it's like less, maybe, we're not over hiring people necessarily, but we've got to, do more with less. And consistent optimization is one way to do that. Just looking and getting a little bit better every day or every week, every month. So let's start with the state of performance optimization. So question for you is, why do you think right now so many organizations kind of look at sales performance on a 6 or 12 month audit, right? Like it seems like this kind of mindset of like overhauls and set it and forget it is pretty common. And I'm just curious, like because again, you've been through so many different variations of this at different phases of LinkedIn's growth. Why do you think that is? Why do you think people struggle to have something more than just like an annual review?
Yeah, I think it's the right question, Jake. I think, from my perspective, I think a lot of companies and a lot of teams are just trying to get through a process that they don't really think about strategically. I think I was reading a book the other day, and there was one of the quotes by Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War. And he said, I think it's something like, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory, and tactics without strategy is just noise before defeat. And,
Ooh.
I think that that semi-annual cycle or annual cycle that a lot of teams go through, that's just tactics, right? Like, hey, we've got to just implement something. We're not even sure why we're doing it.
Right.
Let's just make the process better and better. And, I think the best companies are really thoughtful about what they're trying to achieve. The best teams are in a constant state of innovation, right? Like, one of the best things that ever happened to LinkedIn was when we got absorbed by Microsoft and we started watching how did they operate. One of their keys is growth mindset. And the idea behind growth mindset is we're going to learn from everything, right? And I give a lot of credit to Satya Nadella, who said, he basically said, we're going to go from a company who is a know-it-all company to a company that wants to learn it all. And that's the right place to be. I think if you kind of put yourself in that position where we're just going to constantly get better, then I think it changes the framing, and it really becomes more of an operational mantra as opposed to just tactics.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue, because I think a lot of people are like, yeah, that sounds great, or it would be, because I think everyone. It's so funny. I was talking to a group of leaders here in New York about this yesterday, leadership team from the Brooklyn Nets, and one of the things I was talking to them about is I've never met a team or organization that doesn't think they have a growth mindset. That nobody's like, you know what, I have a fixed mindset. I am not coachable at all. And so let's maybe talk a little bit about a success story. Obviously, in this mindset of where and in that world, it was evolving rapidly from 2008 and beyond to new players coming in, etc. So maybe share a success story, and I'm going to pull up a couple of things that that you put together specifically around that I think are just like good general frameworks for people. I'm a big fan of frameworks and cheat codes and ways to get ahead, and why reinvent the wheel is a big saying of mine. So I'm just going to pull this up real quick and maybe we can talk to it.
Great. Yeah. While you're doing that, I'll provide a little bit of framing. So I think I'm sure no one wants to remember if you were in software sales in 2023. You'd probably rather forget that year, is my guess. Same is probably true for a lot of my teammates at LinkedIn. Fiscal year 23 was I think it was hard for everyone. I think expectations were really high. The bounce in 21 and 22 was so powerful that everybody had plans that they probably
keep the good times rolling, man.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like, the 2022 was like, the first half was gangbusters, and then it was like, the wheels are coming off. But
there you go.
2023 will be better.
It'll be better. Yeah. Well, Microsoft's fiscal year is June 30th. So so we basically got it both ways. One of the things that we realized was the way that we were doing things previously was kind of non-sustainable. Let the good times roll, Jake, as you pointed out, was what everybody was feeling at the time. And then things got hard and we said, hey, we got to make some changes. One of the big changes that had been already implemented but wasn't working super well was we had merged two lines of business. And so we asked, if you know anything about LinkedIn, you had one team of people that was selling recruiting technology, and then another group of people that was selling LinkedIn Learning. And we merged it, and we basically said, hey, you know what? We're all basically selling to the CHRO, so let's do it as one team. And what had happened, not surprisingly, was people were just selling the stuff that they were used to selling.
Right.
They were saying like, hey, I want to just keep it. I've been super successful selling LinkedIn Recruiter, or I've been super successful selling LinkedIn Learning. And what we said was, that's probably that's not what we want. What we want is everybody needs to sell the full portfolio. And so we started with this is called the support continuum. This was something that was invented by a number of my colleagues at LinkedIn. I've used it more often than I can count. This was one of two frameworks that I wanted to show you all today. And the idea behind it is like, let's figure out where everybody's head is at. Do we all understand why we're going the direction that we're going? Do we believe in what the change is that is required? And where do we sit on this thing? And so you literally take this thing, and it's listed 1 through 5, and you ask people, like, where are you? Where are you on the support continuum? And hopefully you get an honest answer. Out of curiosity, what do you want to see? Like, if you're asking your team, put yourself on the support continuum. What are the best, let's call it the best top 2 answers that you can get from your team? Just put it in the chat. And while folks are doing that, I'll define them. So number 1, an active resistor is someone who's vocally opposed to the change that's required, right? Like, yep, I hear what you want us to do. I'm against it, and I've got a bunch of reasons why. A passive resistor, someone who's against it, but they don't want to talk about it. They're afraid that saying something might get them in trouble or may get them ostracized or put them, in a bad light with their manager. Neutral is like, I don't know. I'm undecided. This could be good. This could be bad. Passive supporter, I actually think this might be right, but I don't want to put my voice and my head behind it. And then a vocal supporter is a champion, right? That's somebody who's just like, they're totally on it. So as folks are throwing the numbers in the chat, the 5 is obviously, that's what you're hoping everybody's going to be, right? You want everybody to be like, championing this thing, and we're behind it, and it's awesome. That is the best. That's the best outcome. The second best one is a 1. So May and Ed got it in the chat pretty quickly. You want to hear from your active resistors. You want to hear from the folks that say like, I'm against this, and here's why, because you can deal with it if they're being vocal, and you love the idea that people are being honest and they're forthcoming about how they feel about the change. And so that's the first set. Just going back real quick to the continuum. The thing that you need to really look out for are the number twos. The passive resistors are that's the cancer within the organization. I don't mean that about people, but if you've got someone who's trying to sabotage in the background and you don't know about it, that's the hardest thing to manage as a leader. And so trying to extract those passive resistors and make them active resistors, or try and move them up the support continuum, that's what you want to do.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And I think, calling that out. It also, it's interesting to think about, wow, like maybe again, if we're trying to have this mindset of like, hey, we're gonna be optimizing or changing quickly, that the thought that it's better to push a passive resistor back to a 1 is probably better, right, than staying in 2, right?
That's right. Yeah. I want to know
really eye-opening.
Yeah, Amazon's got a great, they've got a great framework for this. They call it disagree and commit.
Right.
Yeah. So like, hey, I want to hear from everyone. I want opinions to be known. Like, let me know. And then at some point, when we've heard all the arguments and, we have to make a decision, we have to move forward, it's okay to say, I don't totally support this, but I'm going to commit to it anyway, because I know this is the decision that is going to, it's the moving forward plan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've heard that used quite a bit, agree and commit or disagree and commit, but either way, like, we're moving this way. So let's do it. So let's talk about like metrics here, maybe a little bit. When you think about proactive performance management, right, and metrics or indicators, like what metrics or indicators are most critical, for proactive, performance optimization?
Yeah, I'll start by saying, like, I'm like obsessed with data. I'm obsessed with metrics. I wear, one of these sleep tracker things. It's an Oura ring. My wife is also obsessed with data. She has a blood glucose monitor, and she doesn't even have diabetes. She might be one of 3 people on the planet who, just wants the stats. And so we, I love looking at data. I love like tracking metrics. And I think that what I've run afoul of is trying to track too many things,
right?
Not knowing exactly why I'm tracking them, and then realizing oftentimes I'm tracking something that isn't even being tracked correctly, or it's pointing to the wrong answer. And so what I want to do is I want to narrow the field. What I want to do is, I'm using a lot of quotes right now, but I love doing so. Warren Buffett has the 5-25 rule, which is like, pick 25 of the most important things, right? Like, what do you want to accomplish? And like, order them in priority level. And then go to the top 5 and say, okay, these are the 5 things. And 5, by the way, is an absolute maximum. I think most organizations should probably be focused on 3 or few.
3, yeah.
But get to the top 5. And then it's not that like you kind of deprioritize passively the next 20. You have to actively deprioritize the next 20. So you have to get like hyper good at 1 through 5. And put all of your energy into 1 through 5 and get rid of all of the noise that's out there, because there's a ton of it. And
that's a good call out.
Yeah, I mean, like we're all, as sales leaders, we're being asked for data all the time. We're being asked to, fix things. Everything's always broken, right? When we're leading teams, like, you can find a million things that need to be fixed, but getting to that priority stack is super important. So
I hope every leader hears that. I just really, just to double down on it, it's, there's no point, like a lot of these other metrics, like they're not the ones, there's a book, I think it's 4 Disciplines of Execution. And it talks about this. It's like, like you have these lead metrics, and usually the metrics, that would be kind of the thing I toss on top, is like, you want to, like, I think focusing on the lead, are you looking at lead metrics? Are you looking at lag? Whenever possible, right? Sometimes you need the historical data to make the decision, but just less is more, I think, with this. And I can't tell you how many times we came into organizations and like, well, we're tracking this. And it's like, why? Are you doing anything with it? And this goes back to the whole concept of consistent performance optimization. If you're not doing anything about it actively, then is it worth tracking, like, and looking at every week or month or quarter, right? Yeah. So I interrupted your point.
No, I think that's right on. I mean, I love the point. And Jake, you and I worked on a project together when I was at LinkedIn, where we This was the biggest change management product that I think the go-to-market teams had ever undertaken. And, we built basically a new sales framework, a new go-to-market framework. And there was so much to roll out. And we were so hungry to do it. This is a multi-billion-dollar business that's like going through this massive change. And of course, everybody wants it done immediately. And the truth is we had to parse it all out. And then we had to sequence everything. And then we had to exercise a lot of restraint and patience. And it's hard. I heard one time that when you want to enact a change with a sales team, it takes 3 quarters. Because the first quarter, everybody's in denial, right? They're all pushing back.
Right.
And maybe this will pass. Maybe this is a fad, I don't know. It might be gone tomorrow. The second quarter is like you start seeing some like Moneyballer performances. And then in the final quarter, people go, okay, this is actually here to stay. I'm going to get on board with it. And so if you have a small number of priorities and each one of those priorities takes 3 quarters, then, map it out. A big change could take years, literally years.
Yeah, and that's not just for a huge team too, right? Anybody listening, like this is just as applicable in a team of, 20 or 15 or whatever, right? Where change, if we just plug something in and behavior automatically changed, or somebody learned a new skill, but that's just not how it works. And I think too, just being very thoughtful, it's like, we do a lot of technology implementations for a variety of sales technology. And I can tell you there's almost an inverse correlation between the people that try to roll it out as fast as possible as opposed to the people that like purposely take time, and it's because the buying of the software is step 0. The real thing, it starts there. And actually, this is a good segue here. Let's talk about this idea of like, okay, so this makes sense. So we're going to track less things. We're going to be very purposeful about what we're tracking. And then we're going to make sure we're getting kind of buy-in, as a part of this. And I'll just kind of share it. I think this is a good segue to, this idea of reinforcement, right? Because again, when you think about ongoing performance optimization, it's about, great, we're always establishing kind of benchmarks. So there's always maybe potentially some new changes that might happen. So, building a framework around this is critical to where you can make sure that the changes that you make land.
Yeah, I think this is right on. So this is the other framework, Jake, that you know about from LinkedIn. And it's a great way of just making sure that you're measuring and focused on the right things. So let's take it step by step. The why, obviously, everyone needs to understand the why. Why are we doing this? Because nobody likes change. Mostly nobody likes change. There are some people that absolutely crave change. But, beginning with the why, has everybody nailed the narrative, right? Has every people manager in the organization, do they know their why, their own why? Can they explain it to their teams? Are their teams able to, describe it back to them? I think that's like a really important piece. That, by the way, can be measured, as can everything on the 5-step reinforcement. Leading from the front, are the leaders actually demonstrating that they're willing to do the work that they're asking everybody else to do? Servant-based leadership, or just everybody rolling up their sleeves and getting dirty. You can call it what you want, but you want to see your leaders like going through it with you and understanding where are the breaking points, where's the pain in the process, how are we going to continue to optimize, because it's probably not optimized on day one. The measurements, there's a laundry list here, but narrowing it down to like, hey, number one, what is the true north metric? How do we know in 1 quarter, in 1 week, whatever your measurement of time is, that this thing is going to be successful? So for one of the teams, for example, when I mentioned that we merged the LinkedIn Learning team with a recruiting team, sales teams. And all of the new business sellers were from the recruiting side of the business. There were almost none from the learning side. And so we said to all the folks who had a background in recruiting sales, in the first month, we want you to sell at least 1 customer new business on LinkedIn Learning. Absolutely everyone. We're going to hold the managers accountable. We're going to hold the reps accountable. We're going to hold the SDRs accountable, you name it. And, for us, within, I think, 2 months, we had gotten to like 95%. had been able to make the change. But we said, this is the true north metric for this team. This is how we know you all are going to be successful. And then we can line that to the
so
input.
simple. It's so simple too, right? It would have been very, okay, how much qualified pipeline, from this and your mix. And like, there's so many ways that you could have botched that, just thinking of how other, measuring, like over measuring the efficacy versus taking the time to like, well, what would be the one thing we could look at that's like really easy to track and would demonstrate it? And I think that's just such a good call out when you're kind of picking these things that you're going to measure to optimize on a consistent basis, that it is easy. It's easy to track and optimize. And it really is the thing, something that's simple and can give you, maybe it's not, maybe if you'd have measured 5 other things, you could have gotten slightly more accurate, but not really, right? It's like, it's good. Yeah. It's plenty directionally right. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, that's right. And it doesn't mean you have to ignore every other measurement. It just means that they're prioritized, and you say like, hey, number 1 has to win, right? The number 1 metric that we track, we can't miss that one. And if it means that number 4 and number 5 fall off the list, that's okay. We're willing to make that trade-off. It's not great, but it's acceptable. What's not acceptable is that we're great at 3, 4, and 5, and we missed 1 and 2. That means that we're not focused in the right places, or we're not measuring the right things, or we don't have the right tools, but like, let's all be focused on the fact that there is a priority stack to all this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Moneyball is very simple. If you've ever seen the movie or read the book, big fan favorite, like, who's doing this really, really well? And like, let's give them a microphone. Let's give them a voice. Let's hear from them on how they're doing things. And I've heard from people that I've talked to that they say, well, that would never work in my organization because, people want to keep their trade secrets to themselves because they're competing. My response to that is like, well, that sounds more like a cultural element.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything else, right? So anyway, that's moneyballing. And then holding people accountable. This works in 2 ways. This is stick and carrot stuff. But like often we fell into the trap ourselves of, people who are getting promoted that hadn't been doing the things that we said were most important. They weren't nailing priorities. They weren't hitting the true north. They were crushing their numbers, but the priorities were falling behind. And so all of those things need to line up, like, can you go to club if you don't do this stuff? Can you get promoted? Can you get a raise if you're not executing against the priorities that we're asking for? And this goes for managers. This goes for directors, up and down the stack. And if you're consistently falling behind, are we doing anything about it? Even if you're crushing it on every other front, because the rubber meets the road on the things that we say that are important. Otherwise, we're not telling each other the truth.
That's right. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people that are like listening to some of this, again, kind of trying to, bring this together for people, I think this idea of, again, going back to the very first thing we talked about, which is like, well, why don't people do this? And it's like, well, because they don't have like a consistent way or framework like what we shared here to put in place kind of a change agent on a more consistent basis, right? It's like they're constantly, scrambling or half deploying things, and they don't really have a good framework to make sure that the reinforcement lands. And I think for anybody out there, again, thinking about the reinforcement, that project's a really great example. We really learned a lot early where it's like, okay, when the leaders are going through the program, what's this, there was this first version, which was like the brown bag reinforcement, and that did not work. And so then it's like, okay, we need to have a more structured plan. And that's what helps to kind of like land the plane, is like that structured reinforcement and really just thinking through, how to do that. And the why, you mentioned the why and lead from the front. I think the other piece is just make sure when you're installing this change, the frontline managers for almost any sales initiative are the most important variable. That's it. And so if you're over focused on, the team and the training for the team and making sure they understand it, or the other big mistake, and I think what we did really well with, whenever we worked together, is we made all the managers go through it like first and head. So by the time the teams got it, they knew how to talk about it. And so when you're making these kind of change deployments, the frontline manager, you need to give it to them, let them breathe with it and let them use it, and then kind of start the deployment process. And I think that's probably the biggest mistake that whenever we come into failed change management initiatives, or the ability to like actually see the optimization work, it's from frontline manager, not being bought in the first place from frontline manager. So,
That's totally.
all
The do
right.
as I say, not as I do kind of approach.
Well,
To
exactly.
leadership.
It's like, look, if we're all learning this together, it's much harder for me to be like help you, right? Like if I'm like, hey Jake, we're gonna be making like these improvements on every quarter to like parts of our sales process, and if me as a manager, I'm not versed enough in it, I'm gonna shy toward what I know works from before. And so if I don't know it, how can I teach this person? And so anybody out there, these are some like just gold best practices. Man, it's 28 minutes. All right. I'm getting the wrap it up box here. Okay. What final advice would you give to leaders or orgs that are still skeptical about the benefits of more consistent performance optimization? We talked about how to do it. What advice would you give to anyone who's like, man, every time we try to make change, it sucks. So I don't want to do that,
Yeah. I think it's really about simplicity, just keep it simple with the, KISS method. What I've gotten wrong every time I've gotten it wrong, and by the way, I've gotten it wrong more times than I've gotten it right, is that I'm trying to take on too much. And my team, if they feel bought in, if they feel like, hey, this is a trusted environment, then they'll let me know pretty quickly.
Right.
Everybody, when you're in the conference room and everybody's like, let's go, let's do this, rah, rah, head full of steam. It feels like you can take on the world. And, when it hits the field, they're going to let you know whether they can take this on or not. You'll know pretty quickly. And, I think the advice that I would offer to a lot of leaders is listen to what they're saying. Doesn't mean you have to actually back off and slow down, but make sure you understand what they're telling you when they're saying, hey, this is really tricky and we're not able to pull this off the way we want to. And here's why.
Yeah, I love that. We had a question. I want to take this one. We can go a little bit over. One of the things is like, how do you square change management taking 3 quarters with continuous innovation or improvements to the process? And I'll give my 2 cents, which is again this mindset of like change takes time. I think we're talking about there's kind of different types of optimization, right? There are certain types, and this is my take on it. You can add your take. There are times when you need a hard reset because of market conditions or business conditions. In those scenarios, it's taking longer to really be thoughtful about a broader set of changes becomes critical. And so taking 3 months or 3 quarters or whatever. There are other changes that are more tactical. And when you think about, maybe it's how we end a meeting, right? And we look at the historical data. Our sales cycle is going long, and you look at a data point that says, man, our stage 2 to stage 3 is going like this. This doesn't make sense that it's taking this long to move to this step. What's happening at the end of step 2? Oh my gosh, like the team, like we're going to do a small deployment. And this is actually a really perfect example based on what you said. The fix is right for the continuous improvement, because we're looking at this. We look at this thing. We go, okay, moving forward, do not book a meeting or do not get off the meeting until you book the next meeting. And we're gonna manage, and you're gonna drill it home with your reps and team, and you're gonna do this one thing. And I think to me, those are kind of a good way to put this. Jeff Bezos, he called them door 1 problems, door 2 problems. Door 1 problems are right for this because you can always walk back. You can walk back through them. Door 2 problems are like, hey, we're gonna change the structure of our go-to-market. So that's how I would, I guess, like frame that, Ran. Is just, if it's a door 1, it's right for continuous it's right for this. If it's a door 2, then we're, consistent optimization takes a different meaning, because it's just, the big picture, you're consistently optimizing every few years versus maybe 10 years, right? Which is still an improvement.
Yeah, I love that, Jake. I think I'll also add, the irony of these door 1 and door 2 changes or changes for lack of a better word. The existential crisis actually is easier from a change management perspective than the small incremental change, because the small incremental change, people fight it because it's not necessary. Like it's going great. Why do I need to do this? I've got my hands full with everything else. But if we've got an existential crisis on our hands, there's a new competitor, the market has changed, whatever the thing is, it's pretty easy for everybody to see like things aren't going really well right now and we're in trouble and we have to make the change. So I prefer, it's easier to manage through the existential crisis for legacy.
Yeah, I think, for me, a lot of it is, we've got to start to move toward making more database decisions on what our customers are saying that they want and making changes to our process based on that, based on the data versus like, I've always set up a sales process this way. And this is just what I do. And this is it versus like, no, we need to kind of look at this. So, all right. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. David, thank you, man. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the interview with myself and David. Now we're going to talk about this week's tech trend, right? And it's a really meaty one. Every CFO is sitting at the edge of their seat saying, please, God, Jake, don't say pick point solution so we can get discounts if we go full platform. But I'm going to try to help you break down and understand what is right for your business. What is right? When is the right time to say, let's consolidate, save some dough? And when is the right time to pick a point solution? Not too long ago, sales tech companies were heroes in their own little niches, right? Fast forward to today, it's a race to become the Swiss Army knife, right? Where sales are sitting in here and they're doing everything from one platform, right? But here's the catch. Is in trying to do everything, are we doing any of it well? Consolidation sounds appealing for sure, right? One platform to rule them all, less hassle, definitely lower cost usually, right? And streamlined training. It's like, hey, it's one easy, simple to use platform. But the real question is, does the convenience come at the cost of performance where it counts most? Let's break down two very practical ways to decide which path is the right path for you. Step number one is first assess the impact on your sales process. This decision should not be made just in the exec and in the boardroom. This decision should be made with the help and support of the frontline team and frontline leaders. If a tool excels in driving your key metrics, then great, keep it, right? Consolidation makes sense only if it doesn't compromise the outcomes of generating the results that you want, whether that's a better customer experience or more sales, right? And you want to make sure that when you're looking at these processes, you say, you're very deliberate and you say, what part do we expect this tool to impact? And instead of looking at it as the holistic tool, it's like this feature of the tool. Okay, we're going to make a switch from this tool to this tool. It has three components. This first one, how is the team using this technology today? How would a switch impact it? Let's get granular. Okay, all right, well, that's fine. It's not as much of a trade-off. Makes sense. Okay, what about here? Well, this new tool doesn't have this, and this. Okay, how impactful is that going to be on the sales process? So that's step one, everyone, is you have to break down the individual features and look at their impact on the sales process. Not this tool versus this tool. It's this feature versus this feature. Second, and this I cannot stress enough, is implementation and support. My friends, I cannot tell you how many times I've heard a sales tech rep, it's probably thousands, it's gonna be so easy to get started. Our sales organization and our CS organization are world-class. They're gonna take care of everything for you, right? But best-in-class tools are gonna push the boundaries. They know how to do this one thing better than anyone. Their success team knows how to implement that one thing better than anyone. When you start to stretch out, and now you go and buy a platform where they haven't even sold some of this stuff before, and the person you're talking to has maybe implemented this part of the tech 3 or 4 times, you have to go back to your sales process and say, hey, this is a relatively new feature for them. If this implementation or integration gets a little bungled because they don't really know it that much about it, are we okay with that? And it could be, again, as you break down the features, you realize like, look, we do really need world-class support around this piece. Let's stick with the company that we have today. Because there definitely is a time and place where, again, you have to have the right onboarding and support coupled with it makes an impact on the business. So those are the two things, my friends. If you are looking at consolidating or looking at using best in class, you just have to do those things. Look at the process, break out the features, compare each one side by side, not company holistically together. And then support factor should be that X factor. Meaning, if the support factor is not going to be there, you have to stay with your best-in-class solution. So that's it. Each situation is different. You do what's best for you, but feel free to send this to your CFO as well too, right? When they're going through the vetting process, are you getting maniacal on the features and the impact on the sales process, or are you just looking at the last page of the proposal and the price? All right? So that's it for Tech Trends this week. Make sure, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already for the latest and greatest Innovative Seller Show episodes coming out. And now to wrap it up, some Q&A.
What key performance indicators do you believe are most indicative of sales success in the current environment?
Look, there's a whole concept around this idea of leads versus lags, right? Lags are the outputs. It's like you hit quota, you hit your number. Leads are the inputs of what do you need to do. And here's what I will say. The most important thing you can do is know your lead metrics. They are different than everybody else's. Sales leaders love to say, hey, you've got to do 100 activities. Everybody's got to do 100 activities. You've got to do A, you've got to do B. You need to know your sales cycle. Your company's sales cycle is 65 days. What's your sales cycle? What's your conversion rate? So the most important thing you can do, I don't know if there's like one like specific number, but you need to know how your numbers differ from the mean, the averages, which is what you're being managed to, so you know where you can get better.
How can we foster a culture of continuous learning and development within our sales teams to stay ahead of the industry trends?
I love teachbacks. I love, hey, I heard about this thing. Here's what I saw. And teachbacks from the sales reps themselves. So again, you probably heard me talk about, going and making sure that your sales team has an hour every week to try a moonshot, to try something new, to go take a demo with a random tool. Have your team teach back the things that are working. Have your team say, hey, you know what? I've been trying this experiment over the last 3 weeks. This is what's working if you guys want to start to run with it. So I think you've got to create the environment where they feel like, hey, I've got dedicated time to innovate, and then have them share with each other. That's what's going to spread like wildfire versus every decision having to be made up on high.